State your name.
Sharon Kramer.
Sharon, tell me about your background. Um, what's your profession?
I have a degree in marketing. I graduated from the University of Mississippi with a degree in marketing, and I've always made my living in sales and marketing. I'm corporately trained by NCR Corporation. I went through their 2-year extensive program of how to write proposals and um, approach. So I have a superior knowledge of how concepts are presented to form decisions. And in recent years, I've been working as an advocate. An issue came to my attention, and what I advocate for is integrity in health marketing. Health marketing is the science of studying how scientific and medical concepts become policy. The Centers for Disease Control even has a whole department of health marketing. So it's a very science and medicine. You can have great science, you can have great medicine, but if you can't get it the right science and medicine market into policy, it doesn't have an impact on the public.
How did you get interested in that?
I had you could say I had a watershed moment in my life. We had a leak in an ice maker line of a refrigerator in our home, and mold and contaminants grew. And when we found it, we called our insurer, who sent us these remediators who didn't know what they were doing, and they blew it all over the house. Our house became cross-contaminated. I have a daughter with cystic fibrosis, and she's allergic to mold to begin with, so the house was not safe for us. We were unable to go home after the cross-contamination, and everybody kind of did this, not my fault. So we ended up in litigation with our insurer, and our family came out fine. We received approximately a $500,000 settlement, and I could have moved on. But as I was going through and learning about the issue and the contaminants and what was happening to people, I saw there were thousands of people out there who were not as fortunate as us. They were being called liars, that they were trying to scam insurers for saying they were sick and they couldn't get any help. And as I started sort of blogging and trying to learn, I also was sharing information, and people started coming to me and saying, "Could you help me? My husband can't get any medical treatment, and my child's sick." And so I kind of became an accidental advocate. I saw a problem. There was a fraud in health marketing of false science that was causing the problem for these people. And I was really naive about how politics work. And I thought, well, okay, before I go back to life, I'm going to do something for these people that are in this issue and can't get any help. I'm just going to go to Washington, D.C., and I'm going to tell them there's a problem, and they'll immediately take care of that. And that's been, 8 years ago. And I'm still advocating for these people. I've made some strides at removing the false science that's been marketed into policy. I'm published in the International Journal of Occupational and Environmental Health over the conflicts of interest of health marketing over this issue. I'm published in the Journal of Allergy and Clinical Immunology. I ended up moderating a United States Senate staff briefing that was sponsored by the majority Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensioning Committee and the majority Public Works Committee. That was for, and I brought in a panelist. My panelists were an immunologist, an ENT, a microbiologist, and a biotoxin treating physician. And I got to explain, I got to moderate and to have the true science explained to the staffers. And from there, Senator Kennedy, the late Edward Senator Kennedy, ordered a federal government accountability office audit of the issue. That was in 2006. And what came out was a report titled Indoor Mold, Better Coordination of Federal Efforts. Better coordination of federal efforts would improve whatever it was, outcome. Anyway, so that's how I got into it, and that's the positive side of the issue. In the meantime, while I was moving forward, those that were promoting the false science were also trying to silence me and others from removing it from policy. And the California courts, my first public writing exposing who all was involved in mass marketing the fraud, the California courts helped the fraud promoters frame me for libel with actual malice over the writing, and which that aided the fraud to continue. And then after they did that, I refused to shut up, and I still moved on, helping to move the science forward. Now what the courts have been trying to do is silence me of their role in aiding the fraud to continue. So it's been quite a journey, and it continues.
So the courts are trying to silence you in terms of bringing this information to the public's attention?
Correct. Originally they were trying to silence me of the fraud in science. I wrote an article exposing how the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Institute for Legal Reform, the Manhattan Institute Center for Legal Policy, the American College of Occupational and Environmental Medicine, which is a trade association made up of workers' comp doctors, and a corporation called Veritox Inc., in which one of the principals is Brian Hardin. He's a retired deputy director of CDC NIOSH and also a retired assistant surgeon general of the United States. How he and his business partner, Bruce Kelman, who comes to this issue from Big Tobacco, had mass promoted that Mr. Kelman and Mr. Hardin could apply math extrapolations to a single rodent study and prove that everyone who was claiming illness or death from these buildings were liars out to scam insurers and employers. So they mass marketed this false concept into policy, and I have it in Mr. Kelman's own words, that the Manhattan Institute think tank paid them so that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce could promote this to the courts. So in other words, what they did is they mass marketed hate crimes against the environmentally disabled and dying to the courts. Then their company, Veritox and Mr. Kelman, sued me for libel for the first writing over the words altered his under oath statements. Those are the only words I've ever written that have been challenged as incorrect. And the courts made my writing look like I accused Mr. Kelman of altering his under oath statements and lying about being paid to write the ACOM mold statement, when my writing is 100% correct. He was paid to write a mold position statement for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and I just wrote about how they were connected. The courts also suppressed the evidence that Mr. Hardin has even been a party to this litigation. When you go on appeal, there's something called the Certificate of Interest to Parties, where you have to disclose who are the parties to the litigation. Well, the courts know that Mr. Hardin's name has been missing from the Certificate of Interested Parties. So they concealed the connection to the federal government, CDC, via that. So that was the first case. They framed me for libel to make me look like a malicious liar over telling the truth of a major fraud in policy. And then as that was in 2005 when they started down that road. Nobody had any idea what the hell I was talking about this fraud in policy. But as I became stronger and I got a federal audit, and I was even able to get the Wall Street Journal to write a front page article on the conflicts of interest of it, the court's actions of what they did to me, it became more apparent of how much fraud they were aiding. So then the court's motivation became to silence me of what they did to aid it to continue. So they filed a second lawsuit against me after they framed me for libel, saying, now you can't publish those words that we framed you, that we can't publish those words because you've been found guilty of libel for them. But what they were really doing was saying, you can't publish these words while telling about what we did. And so they keep harassing, and I keep saying, no, I'm publishing it, and I'm telling exactly what you did. It's my constitutional right to do so, and I have every right in the world to talk about all-out criminal and fraudulent actions of officers of the courts. And these are no little judges sitting in some podunk courtroom somewhere. One of them is Justice Judith McConnell. She's the presiding justice of the 4th District Division I Appellate Court. She recently stepped down as chairwoman of the California Commission on Judicial Performance. This is the quote-unquote independent state agency that supposedly oversees all the ethics for the judges in the California judicial branch. The other main one that I can show willfully, I mean, they've falsified documents, they've suppressed so much evidence. The mafia couldn't do any more actions criminal than these judges. The other main one is Justice Richard Huffman. Justice Huffman just recently stepped down as the chair of the Executive Committee of the Judicial Council of California. That's the governing body of the judicial branch. The chair of the Executive Committee is the most powerful justice in the whole state of California. So, it was a politically motivated, what they did to me originally was politically motivated to shut me up, and now it's just flat out corruption to hide what they've done that's so corrupt, and the billions in dollars and fraud because of it, and the thousands of lives that have been devastated because of it. I'm not shutting up, and they keep on going. So that's where we are today.
So tell me in a nutshell, what were you angry about in terms of environmental issues? What did you discover?
What I discovered was, as I got into this issue, like I said, my family came out fine, and it's because my daughter had cystic fibrosis. We were treated differently because she was already immunocompromised, and the rules are different. But what I discovered is there were thousands of people out there who were very sick and looking for help, and they were being called liars. And I knew it wasn't true because I was sick myself, so I knew they were telling the truth of what they were experiencing. And I started looking at, something's just not right here. Where's the disconnect between what these people are stating and how they're being treated by the government and the physicians and the private sector? So what I started doing was reading medical journal publications on it, and I told you I have a degree in marketing, and I can cite a spin document a mile away. They're very easy to read. What you do is you read the first couple lines, and then you read the last couple lines. And if the conclusion is not even close to what the premise was in the beginning, then you read in the middle and you find where the disconnect went. So what it was, they were just willfully mass marketing false science into policy. ACOM, the American College of Occupational and Environmental Medicine, they write workers' comp guidelines for many states that physicians have to follow. With the mold statement, because there's been so much litigation over this, I have the emails from the time that, among their members, from the time they were accepting Kelman and Hardin's science to be portrayed as the scientific understanding of thousands of physicians. And one of the emails from the Scientific Affairs Committee chair who was overseeing this endeavor was to the president of ACOM at that time, and he was the email was discussing how several of the members were very upset about this paper coming out, that it was a quote unquote, a litigation defense argument. But he stated in the email, if we don't accept this as a position paper, we will turn Brian's science into garbage, and that would be an important violation of Brian. This is a guy who just, he was a retired assistant U.S. Surgeon General. So it was just politics is all it was. And then Mr. Hardin and Mr. Kelman, after they got that paper legitimized as a position paper portrayed to be the consensus of thousands, then the U.S. Chamber of Commerce took it and said, see, this is like a position paper of physicians. Now we're going to market it to the courts. And then these gentlemen have made, I don't even know how much money they've made, then serving as expert witnesses for the defense, denying that these buildings cause illnesses in people. So you asked me in a nutshell, what upset me was I could see how many lives were being destroyed by a science that I love, and I like to see it be used to do the right thing, marketing. My science was being bastardized to destroy these people's lives, to mass market hate crimes into U.S. public health policy. And I just, people say, well, why do you do this? Why do you keep on doing this? And, how can I not do it when I could see there's so many people's lives being destroyed, and they couldn't understand how the dots got connected and how this got mass marketed. So that's not really a nutshell, but it's science fraud. It's marketing and science fraud that's causing hate crimes against the environmentally disabled. That's what I'm fighting.
Okay. So then what is the motivation of the court to lie and or cover this up?
Well, the 4th District Division 1 Appellate Court, they're known as political animals. I can't directly say to you, Justice Judith McConnell is getting X amount of dollars from blah. But I do know that she did become the chairwoman of the Commission on Judicial Performance shortly after this. She did this to me in 2006. Here's the motivation financially for the state of California to do this. In 2005, Governor Schwarzenegger came into office, and one of his big platforms was workers' comp reform. And what the reform was to limit the financial liability for employers and insurers to encourage business to come to California. One way to limit financial responsibility for workplace injury is to make sure that the workplace is safe. But another way to do that is just to deny that the workplace caused the injury or illness. So 1 month after the first court, that was September 2005, denied my anti-SLAPP motion. That means they sued us. We made a motion that, hey, you guys, you're just doing strategic litigation against public participation. 1 month after the lower court denied my anti-SLAPP motion, not following the law, Governor Schwarzenegger endorsed the ACOM mold statement into workers' comp policy. So what happens when an injured worker is injured by mold in the workplace? They are sent to typically a physician affiliated with the University of California. There's these things called Association of Occupational and Environmental Clinics. They're located all over the country, and they're usually at teaching hospitals. So a worker goes there to get examined, and an AOC doctor has been told he has to follow the ACOM mold statement that, no, these people aren't sick from work. Okay, so then the workers' comp claims comes and the litigation comes. The AOC doctor who did it's called an independent medical exam, that said the worker is not sick, then becomes the expert witness for the defense. These guys can make, sometimes they charge $900 an hour for their expert witness fees. Well, when an employee of the University of California testifies as an expert witness, the regents of the UC keep over half of the money. So the regents of the University of California have generated a ton of money off of denying causation of these illnesses. And what happens, the worker can't get his workers' comp. They end up on state and federal disability programs when they can't work to survive. So the taxpayer ends up picking the tab, picking up the tab for it. The term for that is cost shifting. It's where an insurer can shift the cost of what they're rightfully supposed to be paying onto the taxpayer by being able to deny financial responsibility. So it gets the other way that the regents of the University of California have made money off of this science fraud is they get government federal funding for the to hold educational seminars. Remember I told you Brian Hardin was not only an assistant surgeon general, he was a deputy director for CDC, NIOSH, National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. Well, NIOSH funds these seminars at these teaching universities, and with the mold one, I can show NIOSH funded the University of or UCLA to hold a seminar in which the ACOM mold statement was taught to physicians that these people can't be sick. So they're using our federal dollars to teach the fraud. I mean, I have the documentation on this. They were educating doctors by holding mock mold trials and giving them credit for it. I'm not kidding. So it gets complex, and the longer that this has been allowed to stay in policy, I mean, it's garbage. Two guys can't apply math to a rodent study and prove thousands of people are liars. But that's exactly what has happened, and it's been in policy. And the longer it stays in policy, it's no longer being cited. Like OSHA doesn't cite it anymore, EPA doesn't cite it, but it still gets used.
So, what's happening with you right now? What types of damages have you incurred as a result of the court actions?
Well, my husband and I, we used to have a net worth of about $3 million. Right now, we're struggling to make our house payment. The 401ks are gone. The stock is all gone. We just cashed in my life insurance policy. So it's been traumatic for us, devastating that I dared to speak the truth. It's taken 7.5 years of our lives where it takes a tremendous amount of time to do this. You know, originally I had attorneys to help me, but it got so expensive I couldn't afford them anymore, and so I started doing it pro per by myself. And you know, I'm not an attorney. I've had to spend a lot of time at the law library, and thank God there are a lot of other pro pers out there that are willing to share what they've learned and help with case law. And so that has been devastating to us. They've tried to destroy our lives. In January of this past year, the court actually was going to try to deem me mentally incompetent for speaking this truth. I could see it from court documents. There was a hearing that I opted not to attend by right. I didn't attend, and it's right in there. The court's saying, you know, she's a nice lady, but she's got severe mental problems. And then the stage was set. This public defender that they assigned to help me, I never took her as counsel, brought up it's called a Penal Code 1368. It's where they take you down to the psych unit for a mental examination. So it was like they set up a stage play. And when I read the transcript of what was happening, I immediately went out and had to have a psychological exam done of myself to stave off the fact that that they're trying to say I'm nuts. So then they tried to, when that didn't work and I wouldn't shut up, they said, oh, well, you've got to take this direct evidence off the internet. So website owners submitted affidavits saying, no, we're not taking this off the website. So when that didn't work, they tried to get me to sign a false confession of being guilty for libel with actual malice. And when I said, no, I'm not signing that, that would be, what you're asking me to do is fraud, Your Honor. You're asking me to defraud the public. They sent me to jail for contempt of court. It was going to be for 5 days. But after 2 days, they let me out. But they brought me before the court. It was early in the morning. It was still dark. I was handcuffed. I was shackled to a drug addict for a bus ride for an hour from the Las Colinas Women's Detention Center up to the Vista Courthouse. And they had me in my prison garb, no sleep for a couple nights because I was in a dorm setting with a lot of tweakers and prostitutes and heroin addicts, and I have to say these women were very nice to me, but it was still kind of a scary situation. So they brought me in there and they had me appear before the judge, and as a courtesy, the judge asked the plaintiff counsel to come to the hearing, and he again strongly urged that I sign they called it, quote unquote, the retraction of Sharon Kramer. What it was they were trying to coerce me into signing a false confession. And I said, no, I'm not signing it. Send me back to jail if you want, but I'm not signing it. And the judge said, no, that's fine. You don't have to sign it. And they let me out of jail directly from the courthouse, which doesn't happen. They send people back to the jail. So I blogged about it, and then they held me in contempt again for blogging about how they framed me for libel, tried to get me to sign a false confession, sent me to jail, tried to deem me mentally incompetent, gave me a criminal record. And when I blogged about it, they said, oh, you used the words, that I'm supposedly guilty of libel for, altered his under oath statements. So therefore, you're in contempt of court again. And so by this time, I'm saying, you know what, you can do pretty much whatever you want. I don't care. I'm not obligated to show up in your courtroom, somebody who's suppressing the evidence of all this fraud and corruption. I'm not obligated to show up in your courtroom and put my physical safety at risk because I dared to tell the truth and you are so corrupt. So where we are right now, the judge, let's see, I got a $3,000 sanction for putting the evidence of how he put me in jail on the internet. He finalized the case. He held a hearing with no jurisdiction. As of Friday, this judge has lost his courtroom of many years, in which he's now going to be a mediator somewhere down in San Diego, and there'll be another judge up to bat, who, I don't care, bring him on. I'm not shutting up. This is what you did. You have to stop. Until they stop, this fraud's going to continue in policy and lives will continue to be damaged. So they say, they definitely, they want me to shut up, and all I have to do is say no. That's where we are.
So they have not been held accountable for arresting you falsely?
No. They have not been held accountable for arresting me falsely. Because I was falsely incarcerated, I was also unlawfully strip searched. And while I was in there, I'm environmentally sensitive. And while I was in there, I was made to clean the bathrooms of the approximately 80, prostitutes, tweakers, heroin addicts, and that's a high-risk segment of the population for disease, and I became ill from that. I also got shingles from being in there. because it was just shingles is something, it's a nervous system condition that manifests when you're under extreme stress. And, I gave the courts the picture of my shingles, my doctor's report saying, this is what happened, this is probably why she got it. And I asked them to provide me with medical attention. And, they just, an emperor with a new robe. They pretend like nothing happened. I've received no help. I went to the state bar to report the attorney, Mr. Keith Scheuer, for his role in all of this fraud, because they committed perjury to establish needed reason for malice too. So I complained to the state bar on it, and the state bar in LA started to investigate it. The woman's name was Nancy Brown. And when she asked Mr. Scheuer to produce a certain document, this was when was this? April of 2011, and he couldn't produce it, the file suddenly got transferred up to San Francisco, and Miss Brown got moved to a different department. So in December of 2011, I had gone to Governor Brown, can you help stop this? There's a fraud. And this is what's going on. So they sent me a letter, said, go to the state bar. Well, I'd already been to the state bar. So I went back to him again and said, the governor told me to go to you. So I got a call, and I was telling them about the impending threat of incarceration looming for me. So I got a call from a man named Wonder Liang from the state bar, who claimed the state bar had lost my complaint with all the files of how much perjury to establish malice and suborning of perjury. And he asked me, so could you send me the transcript? So I thought he was trying to help me, and so I said, okay, sure, I'll send you that transcript. And I also sent him other information too, because I said, you need this too if you've lost the file. So the next day, Wonder Lang sent something back saying, I read the transcript, there's no evidence of perjury. Well, it wouldn't have been just in that transcript. When I tried to contact him again, Wonder Liang retired 2 days after he wrote me that letter. So I went to his supervisor, Jill Sperber, at the state bar, and said, this isn't right. You can't do this. You're saying you lost the file, and at the same time you're saying there's no evidence? And she said, oh yes, I've had 3 attorneys review it, and there's nothing to it. And I'm saying, how could you have lost a file and say there's nothing to it? And I filed a second complaint about a fraudulent lien placed on my property, the falsification of court documents by this attorney, and the state bar didn't even respond to that complaint. They have to respond when you file a complaint. So I called the LA state bar and said, hey, you didn't respond to that complaint. And they said, oh yeah, we sent it up to San Francisco. So I called Jill Sperber, and she said, well, I just put it in with the closed complaint already. So I can show the Commission on Judicial Performance knows about the conspiracy to defraud, basically is what it is, and racketeering, by what the courts have been doing to me in detail. I can show the State Bar of California knows about the courts, the attorney's involvement in it. I can show the Judicial Council who govern the state of California, their main leaders know about it. I can show the new Chief Justice, Cantel, I can never say her last name, Saki, Sayauke. She knows about it. I can show the Administrative Office of the Courts know about it. I can show Governor Jerry Brown knows about it. I can show President Barack Obama knows about it. I can show Attorney General Eric Holder knows about it. I can show the United States Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pension Committee knows about it. I can show Barbara Boxer knows about it. I can show Dianne Feinstein knows about it. I can show Bonnie Dumanis, the local DA, knows about it. I actually helped her to investigate a workers' comp insurer fraud case where I explained how all this fraud works and the role that her little friends, Judy McConnell and Richard Huffman at the appellate court, are playing in aiding this to continue. She won't she's a political animal. She won't touch them. So nobody ever denies that I'm telling the truth. It's just they all, step back and, oh no, there's no evidence of this. Other than the state bar directly lied. I can show they directly lied that they lost the documents and then professed that they did a thorough investigation. They know how much fraud's going on. They know how many lives are being lost. I've shown them infant deaths by what's going on. And here's something else that I didn't mention. The United States Chamber of Commerce mold position paper is called A Scientific View of the Health Effects of Mold. It's written only by Brian Hardin and Bruce Kelman. The paper cites false physician authorship of also being authored by Andrew Saxon. Andrew Saxon is an immunologist of UCLA. I have him under oath saying he didn't write that paper. So the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's mold position statement has the imprimatur of the University of California on it. That's a violation of the California Constitution for the university name to be used in a political and sectarian endeavor. And they know that their name's on there fraudulently, and they also know that they're making money off of promoting this concept. And it doesn't get. It's just so insidious. And what you're up against is the most powerful lobbying group in the world, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and sick mothers living in moldy Section 8 housing that can't get help for their children. It's just not a fair battle, and that's really what kept me in this issue.
Wow, that's very powerful. So, what do you want to see happen? What are some of the objectives? What would help resolve some of this for you?
What would solve it immediately is if the courts would acknowledge the fact they've been suppressing the evidence Bruce Kelman committed perjury to establish malice in a libel litigation. If they'd acknowledge the fact that they framed me for libel and locked me up for refusing to commit perjury, did me bodily harm, that would immediately cause the fraud to stop in policy. What I want to see is, once that's done, it's sort of like pouring water on the wicked witch. The floodgates should open for the honest scientists of the EPA and the CDC and OSHA to be better able to then get their science into the policy and get it out to the public. All it would take is for a warning to go out to United States health departments and private sector medical associations that these illnesses are indeed plausibly occurring. They don't even have to say they are occurring. They just have to tell them they are plausibly occurring. And that the physicians would feel comfortable to be able to treat these illnesses without fear of retribution and retaliation, and the whole fraud would collapse. But the main thing is, one person acknowledging the irrefutable evidence that Bruce Kelman, author of the ACOM mold statement and U.S. Chamber mold statement, committed perjury while strategically litigating to shut me up, and the whole house of cards falls.
So basically what we have here are court officials that are lying about the validity of environmental hazards in order to cover up or deny workers' compensation claims. That's part of it?
Yes. But what they in my case, because my case is just a libel case over the words altered his under oath statements, they don't even go into the science. All they have to do is deem me a malicious liar for those words, and my credibility about the science is then demeaned. And by suppressing the evidence that the real liar committed perjury to establish malice, his credibility remains intact, which means his science is still able to be used to sell doubt in policy.
Wow, that's pretty powerful.
It really is, and it's just an extraordinary tale when you think about it. What it's really about are two guys who applied math to one rat study and 7 years of litigation over the word altered. And from that, there's billions of fraud and thousands of lives that continue to be devastated.
Wow.
And, so that, this whole issue has taken me into a whole nother realm of constitutional rights, and I'm shocked that the courts are so corrupt. I had no idea this kind of thing was going on. So, as bad as it's been for me, and it's been really hard on my husband. I mean, you can imagine going from I'm going to retire and we're going to have a great life to it's not working out. And my wife is in constant turmoil here. As hard as it's been on us, there are people out there who are, we're fortunate. We have a big family. We have a supportive family. But there are people out there who are just having their children ripped out from under them for no reason other than, they may have smiled wrong at a judge, or, I am in utter shock that there are people sitting in positions of authority who their sole function is to hold up the law, and yet they're the biggest criminals out there. And I'm lucky because I have a strong family, and I can continue to speak out, and I don't give a damn what they do. I'm not shutting up. But you take some little 21-year-old girl who's single, and they took her child from her, and what chance does she have? She doesn't. I mean, the word monsters is not an exaggeration for who these people are. I mean, I'm blown away. So
when you said that you could prove that this information has been sent all the way up to President Barack Obama, the governor, etc., that means that you have certified correspondence, right? You got a response back from them, or a certified letter, or something that says that you sent them something.
Yes, I do. And not only that, today the court sent me to jail. I started this new blog right before that called Contempt of Court for Me, and the day I went to jail, I put on there, contact the president. We put a link how to get to the White House. So a whole bunch of people sent an email to the White House saying, this is what's happening to her. And I got over 1,000 hits on that blog that day, which for a new blog, that's pretty darn good. And the courts, my husband was able to go on the internet and see, it was by that afternoon, the courts had scheduled that I would be let out. So, I've sent numerous letters to Obama. Other people have sent letters to him. People have sent letters directly about themselves, about me. And like I said, I moderated a United States Senate staff briefing. I have direct communication back and forth with them that they know about me being framed for libel out here and how this has aided it to continue. And that's the Democrat side. I didn't even tell you about the Republican side. The one of the main promoters of the U.S. Chamber, that fraud paper that these guys wrote, it was July 17th, 2003. A U.S. Congressman Gary Miller, Republican from California, he's Diamond Bar. He was the main keynote speaker on this. And when the Wall Street Journal article came out that was titled Court of Opinion, Amid Suits Over Mold, Experts Wear Two Hats, and it was directly about Kelman and Hardin and how they got the fraud into ACOM. I just happened to be in Washington, D.C. at that time, and I was able to hand Congressman Miller, I ran into the hallway of the Rayburn building, and I was able to hand him his copy of the Wall Street Journal article about the fraud he helped promote. And, I originally said to him, aren't you Congressman Miller? And he said, yes, I am. And I said, oh, I'm here in Washington over the mold issue. And he said, oh, yes, we've just about got that under control. And I was able to say, well, I have this copy of a Wall Street Journal article. You might want to read it because, what you're promoting is fraud. So he took it, kind of walked away with his head down. They know.
So this is a bipartisan
Excuse me.
cover-up. It's a bipartisan cover-up.
It is a bipartisan cover-up. There's a Republican congressman from Florida who sits on the Ways and Means Committee that GAO report called for funding to a thing called a Committee on Indoor Air Quality, which is overseen by the EPA, and it's a federal interagency committee where you're supposed to have like OSHA and CDC and everybody come together. So the GAO report designated this committee should make sure consistent messaging goes out. Well, the Ways and Means Committee is who would fund this committee. Okay, this Republican congressman from Florida just happens to be a defendant in a mold litigation in Michigan where the ACON mold statement is being used as his defense, and there's a 4-year-old child who has severe brain damage because of the moldy building and loss of oxygen, she couldn't breathe. So, why would he fund the opposite of for his own personal being? And then you have, I have documentation of the United States U.S. Department of Justice hiring Veritox, that's Kelman and Hardin's company, as expert defense witnesses in mold litigation against sick military families living in moldy housing. I can show they paid those guys about over $800,000 in expert defense witness fees from 2004 to 2008. That's the U.S. Department of Justice. And then just recently, Lincoln Military Housing, what they did was they said, okay, we're not going to receive the housing anymore. They gave it to a private sector partner, Lincoln Military Housing. I have documentation of them using this ACON mold statement against sick military families in Virginia just recently. So they're shutting me up on this end. This really sticks in my craw. There are men and women who are off giving their lives in other countries to defend my right to speak the truth in America without retribution, my right for freedom of speech. But yet when I speak the truth about something that is harming and sometimes even killing their children, I am silenced by the corrupt courts. So men and women give their lives so I can speak the truth, but I can't speak the truth while the men and women who are giving their lives, children, are being harmed by our government. I'm an old sorority girl from Ole Miss. I'm a real estate agent from Rancho Santa Fe. I'm not like the typical type of person who's out saying, my government is corrupt and they're involved in conspiracy to defraud the public, and my government is practicing hate crimes against a segment of the population, the environmentally disabled. So I'm not somebody that you would typically expect to say something like that, but I'm saying it. My government is corrupt, and so are the courts. And there's this for the people, by the people, of the people. I don't know who these people are they think they're of, by, and for anymore, because it's certainly not the citizens of the United States.
Well, I'll tell you, this is a real tragedy and so disappointing to hear that you've suffered like this. That they've destroyed your financial well-being. They've damaged your family. You haven't been assisted by the courts. They haven't taken action properly on litigants that are involved. They're hurting the American people in terms of not taking action on environmental issues. They're using faulty documents and experts and science in order to validate denying people's workers' compensation claims.
That's true. I mean, it doesn't get any more corrupt than this. It's hate crimes against the environmentally disabled. It's a violation of the constitutional rights to speak the truth in America. It's retaliation. It's insurer fraud. It's RICO. This is an illicit interstate enterprise for these guys to be able to go out and testify around the country to deny liability of illness based on false science, based on what the courts are done to me. It's relentless harassment. It was false imprisonment. It's been bodily harm, financial ruination, and it keeps on going. And so the reality is, this is where we are. We're at a stalemate. The courts are not going to say, "Oh, gee, Mrs. Kramer, we're so sorry, we're so corrupt. Here, here, we make it up to you." And I'm not going to back down and say, "You're not corrupt," because they are. I can't back down. And every day that this game plays on, somebody's life is being devastated somewhere because they don't realize their environment is making them sick to begin with. And somebody else's life is being devastated because they're already sick and they've gone to the doctor to get help, and the doctor's like, I don't know what's causing your illness. That's another tragedy of this. If these illnesses are caught early, if the symptoms are identified early, they usually reverse themselves and correct 100%. But if the more toxic illnesses from if they're not caught early, they can go into a systemic problem and cause a chronic inflammatory response syndrome, and it can cause organ damage, and it just gets worse. So that's the real tragedy. If people just even knew when they started getting these symptoms, if a doctor said to them, "Hey, have you ever thought about looking at your indoor environment as a possible cause of illness?" That's all it would take to stop a lot of this.
Now, you have a blog. Can you tell people your blog website?
We have two blogs. Mm-hmm. One of them is called contemptofcourt4.me. Mm-hmm. So it's Contempt of Court for Me. And I use that one mainly. I put all my court documents on there. I now write in all of my motions that I submit to the court. This motion can be read online at the short link of Contempt of Court for Me at da-da-da-da. And then I make all my filings so that if they go to that website and click on that link, when my motion opens, my motion also has footnotes at the bottom that are other links. And so if they read the briefs online, they can click on their words and, I can get, I don't know how much, I think probably I've gotten 1,000 pages of court documents in a 10-page filing. So, I'm just telling them, I'm blogging about what you're doing, and they hate it. They respond to blogs that expose what they're doing, like vampires respond to sunlight. They don't want it out there. So I'm trying to help other people learn how to put your filings online and get as much information in there as you possibly can. So that's that blog. Our other blog is called Katie's Exposure Blog, and it actually belongs to a friend of mine, Crystal Stuckey, out of Katy, Texas. And the theme of that blog is exposing environmental health threats and those responsible. That blog has been cited by an OSHA publication. We were cited as a reference for an OSHA publication on indoor air quality issues. And in hard copy, we are cited as reference number 15. When we took the link that they had, number 15, and we updated it to show how my case in California is aiding this fraud to continue, OSHA quietly changed the link on their internet version. So by giving us, we're reference number 15, they gave us like a portal to get things into the federal government, if anybody was reading that document online. And when we showed how the corruption in the California courts, specifically over my case, OSHA just quietly changed the link. And this is the really sad thing about that. Dr. David Michaels is the head of OSHA. He's from George Washington University. Dr. David Michaels, he's done a great job of making progress with OSHA, doing right by workers in certain points. But he is the author of a book called Doubt is Their Product, How Industry's Assault on Science Threatens Your Health. It's about exactly what I write about, how his is started with the tobacco industry, how they market false science into policy, and where that term comes from. Doubt is our product. Another term for it is called taxi cab science, because there were two tobacco guys in a taxi cab that stated, doubt is our product. That's what they sell, doubt of causation. So it's kind of sad that David Michaels, and I actually have mutual friends with Dr. Michaels, it's kind of sad that Dr. Michaels knows what's going on in my case too, and the impact that it has. Nothing.
Wow. Now, there's also a group of attorneys that are trying to improve the ethical behavior in the courts, judges. Can you talk about that? Is it possible? It's
Sure.
called the Alliance.
It's called the Alliance for California Judges. And I'm not extremely well versed on their organization, but I can tell you a bit about it. I think it started off with about 9 judges in 2009, and they're up to 400 members. But this is a very, very sad statement of the state of affairs. The majority of their members remain anonymous of who they are for fear of retaliation from the leadership of the California courts. I mean, how sad is that when judges, who their sole function is to protect the Constitution and including freedom of speech, fear retaliation for speaking out? If they fear retaliation, how are we supposed to expect that they can protect us and our ability to speak out? So one of the big things that they have spoken out about is waste and abuse in the California judicial branch. There's something called the California Court Case Management System. That's the computer system that runs the state of California. And they had this vision that they were going to be able to link all of the courthouses together through this system. And anyhow, there's a couple different versions of it, but the ultimate vision was impossible. It never could have worked. So $2 billion, I believe it was $2 billion that's gone into that. They've now trashed that system, although I think it's still alive underground. The Alliance judges have also spoken out about waste and abuse in the court construction fund. There's a gentleman named Michael Paul who blew a whistle on $500 million missing from the court construction fund. And the Alliance judges have kind of followed up on that. They've talked about $2,000 to change a light bulb courts are paying. I think there's just a lot of them, a lot of waste and abuse going on. California, the judicial branch is severely compromised at the helm. It's a broken system. It's a little oligarchy that keeps control of what's occurring. There are pensions for non-state people who never worked for the state are getting pensions from the administration of the courts. There's a whistleblower in San Diego who blew a whistle on embezzlement in the HR department. Nothing happened. There's a woman, what's her name, Kim Turner. She was shredding documents in family court. I think it's Marin County, as an administrator of the courts. They were shredding documents as they were being investigated by the Bureau of State Auditor. Nothing happened. She got promoted. In my case, I can show Stephen Kelly, who is the clerk of the 4th District Division I Appellate Court, who's also a member of the Judicial Council and would be an employee of the administration of the courts. I can show that he falsified a remitter under the state of the seal of California, a legal document. And then they falsified the CCMS to match the falsification of the document. They went back and changed the computer entry to match the false document. So there's a Assemblyman, Charles Calderon, who tried to, what was the bill? I forget the bill number. It's called the Trial Court's Bill of Rights. And what they're actually trying to do is take complete control of the money from the little judicial council and redistribute it more democratically among the courts. So it's not like you have, right now our courts are set up like you have a corporate office and everybody else are the peons, and that's not the way it's supposed to be. The courts are supposed to be autonomous in their decisions, which includes in the courtroom and their administrative capacities. So it's a mess.
I understand. Well, I'm wondering if you have anything else you want to share with the public at this time.
The only thing that I would like to share is that I'm very appreciative of you and people like Bill Windsor from Lawless America and these alliance judges and many in the mold community have spoken out. You know, if there aren't people like us and like you that will dare to speak out about fraud, it just grows and grows and it gets worse. And I don't think people realize that they might fear retaliation for speaking out on my behalf or your behalf, but what they don't realize is if they don't protect my rights or they don't protect your rights, then it's much easier for someone to come after them when their rights are challenged. So it's really important. When you see a wrong in this country, you not only have a right, I think you have a duty to stand up and speak out about it. And I'm just really, so that's one aspect that I feel extremely fortunate to have been involved in this issue, is because it has introduced me to a group of people that I never would have met before, and I consider them kind of an elite group. They're a noble group. They're people that will speak out and tell the truth no matter what the risk. And so from that aspect, I feel that I'm very fortunate in my life to have taken this path less traveled.
Well, great. It's certainly been an honor to interview you. I really admire you for your courage and for standing up, and that's what I'm doing just as well, attempting to get stories out about social injustice and let the American people know what's going on. And so that's one of the whole objectives with my enterprise. I just want to thank you very much for making the effort to come all the way up here and do the interview with me.
Well, thank you, Walter. It's been a pleasure visiting with you today.
Is there anything else you want to say in closing?
No, just, everybody that's watching this that is defending your little corner of the world and your area of the truth, keep on going, keep on fighting, keep on speaking. Together, we're going to change this and we're going to turn this country around.
Well, that's just outstanding. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Walter.